For the first time, investigators are sharing new details about this deadly fire in Howard that killed twin sisters back in November of 2025. The investigation is now complete, but officials say they may never know exactly what happened inside the home. Samantha Cavalli brings us new details in a First Alert update.
A memorial outside the home on Rockwell Road remains untouched, just 7 months after the deaths of 26-year-olds Haley and Kayla Fritz. Investigators Tuesday sharing more about the conclusion of their investigation into the fatal fire in Howard.
I can't say that in my career as a fire investigator I've dealt with this specific circumstance, so I would say pretty unusual.
Investigators say the fire started with a low-order explosion caused by gasoline vapors that spread throughout the home. They found 3 damaged gas cans inside the residence, in places officials say were unusual.
A portion of the gas at least would have been poured out in areas, and then the gas cans would have been placed where we found them.
The night before the fire, investigators say Kayla and Haley were seen on surveillance video buying empty gas cans at a local gas station, then filling them up. The exact point of origin of the explosion and what ignited the gas are nearly impossible to determine.
The deputies were there relatively quick, and the south side of the residence was showing the most fire. But that was a big area, so exact point of origin is nearly impossible to determine.
Officials confirmed the twins were the only people inside the home at the time and are confident no one else was involved. But they are not saying whether the fire was accidental or intentional. Investigators say the only 2 people who would know are Haley and Kayla.
Talking to family and friends, Kayla and Haley were really good people. They were close, they loved each other, they did everything together. It's just a tragedy.
Investigators say they are still awaiting the final report from the medical examiner's office, but they also say they truly may never know what happened inside the house here on Rockwell Road. Reporting in Howard, Samantha Cavalli, Action 2 News.